Hi everyone and welcome back to High Desert Growing. I'm Jay Bell and today I'm out here watering my garden. It's kind of small this year because I'm reworking my entire backyard, so please pardon my dust and the piles of sand and rocks and just all the goodness that's happening. So let's have a look at this garden plot. The southern exposure is where I'm standing now, and you can see how I've planted according to the heights of the plants so that nothing tall shades the shorter plants. So, basically good rule of thumb, tall stuff on the north side, short stuff on the south side. I'm just going to give this a quick water, get everything nice and wet. Nothing too fancy. Just enough to get everything so that it has the water it needs, right? Because we live in the desert. Now we can move over here to my second bed. I've got some corn and some beans, and it's great. And there's going to be more stuff in here eventually. I just am really behind because I've got everything going on. All right, so that's pretty good water. So back here along my back wall, you can see that I've planted, recently, just this spring, I planted 4 apple trees, and they're getting ready to grow along the espalier fence that I built. And over here is my pomegranate tree, and, just sprinkle a little bit of water and all of that, right? Actually, we're gonna stop right there because everything I did just now was absolutely 100% wrong. First, number one, I'm gonna be that person. I wasn't wearing sunscreen. Trust me, sunscreen is important every single day that you're gonna be out in our sun. Remember that episode that I did on sun intensity? If you haven't seen it, go watch it. There's a link below. Secondly, I didn't have a hat on. So, hat's kind of important. Actually, it's really important. You can burn your eyeballs out here, and it's nice to have that shade. It's really important. But seriously, wear sunscreen. Let's go back and look at where I just watered in my garden. I stood here for a few minutes and I sprinkled water on it. So we're gonna take a look down here. So let's take a look in here. So I just watered this, right? And let's take a look. It smells nice, it looks damp, but it doesn't look particularly, it's a little damp. Let's dig down a little bit. Uh-oh. Look at that. It's dry. It's not even clumping, it's dry. It's dry as heck. So, what happened? If any of that watering practice or the problems of the dry soil underneath looks familiar to you, then we need to re-establish a new routine for your watering system. So I basically just sprinkled the surface of the soil in mulch for a couple of seconds in the middle of the day, no less, when it's hottest, like 90 some degrees, sometimes 100. And it's most likely to evaporate this time of day. So now I've wasted a bunch of time and money and water, and it's no bueno. This is so much better. It's about 9 o'clock in the morning, and the temperature is much better. It's high 70s instead of high 90s. The plants are coming out of one of their most important cycles right now, which is their nighttime cycle, because plants actually have a rest cycle the same way that we do. Here's a quick lesson on plant biology. It's super simple, I promise. During the day, during the heat of the day, your plants are basically working. They're racing like a racehorse. They're photosynthesizing, they're respirating, they're pulling nutrients from the soil, they're trying to get water from the soil, and they're trying to do all of this while they're growing. So basically they're using all of the energy that they're making as they're making it. At nighttime, when there's no light to photosynthesize, they actually have a chance to calm down, cool off, and catch their breath. Basically, they're spending the entire night respirating, which allows them to use the energy that they have and store it. What this does is gives them the extra storehouses that they need to survive things like extreme heat or lack of water or pests or disease. So your plants are going to be healthier and happier if they have a nice rest cycle. They need to sleep, basically. Quick tip, don't shine lights on your garden or any of your plants at night. They need the dark. Plants don't have eyes, but they can sense light in a way that actually we can kind of too. We have the ability to sense light if we don't have eyes. It's kind of cool. So you can water first thing in the morning, like I am. It's actually a little bit later than I normally would. But you can also water in the evening as the sun moves into the west. Now, This direction here is east for me, which means when the sun hits that direction, I have the shade of the house that's to my benefit. And that is really helpful because I can come out here, the temperatures drop pretty quickly. If, however, you have more of a west facing or a south facing yard, then you're probably going to want to think about watering when it's a little bit cooler in the evening or first thing in the morning. I really prefer to water in the morning. I'm more awake in the morning. I can come out here with my coffee before I start the day. And then I can check to make sure that all my watering system emitters are actually working, because sometimes things happen to them. They break or they get clogged, and sometimes you have floods, and floods, uncontrolled water use in our climate is also no bueno. Also, in the early morning is when I can usually find pests, like maybe squash bugs or sometimes tomato hornworms. I prefer to kind of hunt those down at night, but you can find them in the daytime too. Plus, I have better light to be able to see if there's any damage to the leaves, what kind of damage there is, if there's any kind of fungal or disease. It's just better lighting. So I like morning watering because I'm a morning gardener. So if you remember yesterday, while I was watering in the middle of the day, that really hurt, by the way. I hated doing it. But what I really wanted to point out is that the best way to water here in New Mexico is long and slow. Basically, you want to let the water seep in really slowly. Sometimes we have, absorption issues with our soil. I'll talk about that in a later episode. And you really need to give that water a chance to really soak into the water. Otherwise, it just sits on the surface. And guess where the roots are? Mostly not on the surface, especially if you're growing things like squash or tomato or sunflower seeds. Their roots go pretty deep, so you need that water to get down to 12 to 18 inches. Also, I really like to urge people to really be honest with yourself. What kind of gardener are you? Are you hands-on? Do you like to be in there? Do you like to have your hands in the soil? Or are you kind of the person that likes to not get your nails dirty and you want to just let it do its thing and only, get in there when you have to? One of the best things I ever did for myself was to automate a lot of my watering systems. And on most of the rest of my gardening system, not the new one, I actually have an actual watering system that's set up with a watering timer in my garage, and I can set it according to the season. I change it several times a year according to our climate and our weather. If it rains, I turn it off. I actually have a new one that I'm getting ready to install that actually connects to my phone so that I can be in bed. Maybe I'm in bed and I'm like, oh gosh, it's pouring outside, it's monsoon, and I could get on my phone and turn it off so it doesn't water the next morning. Great. I'm that kind of gardener. I know that about myself. Also, I'm the kind of gardener who really likes, I don't know if you can see them right there. I have little bricks on my garden beds. Those are covering my ollas. Ollas are a Native American watering system that's been used here for thousands of years, and they are fan-frickin-tastic. I will make an entire episode dedicated to them because I think they are actually really essential to anyone who really wants to grow it here. They make a huge difference for me. They made a huge difference for me when I first started using them about 5 years ago. One of the most common questions that I see is, how long do I water and how much? That's really going to depend on where you are, what your soil is like, and what plants you're growing. Also, your microclimate. It's hard to make a recommendation without actually seeing the space and living in it. So the best recommendation that I can make for you is that you try a few things out. If you have a watering system like I do, you can try doing what I do to start. So I will water first thing in the morning with my watering system about 16 minutes every other day. This time of year though, I am definitely watering every day. I'm just supplementing by hand and with my ollas. For some of you, maybe you have really, really rich soil, or maybe it's kind of shaded so it doesn't need as much water, in which case you might want to water only 5 to 10 minutes. But if you're really dealing with, really hot temperatures and your plants are looking really wilty, try upping your watering time to like 20 minutes or so and see if that makes a difference. Just dial in and figure out what works for you. For those of you who don't have a watering system, there are other ways to water if you don't have ollas or if you don't have, other options. And they can be as simple as a hose and a sprinkler. Now, if you're going to use a sprinkler, please make sure that you are watering on a low setting. You're not watering like dirt around. I don't want to water this, I want to water that. So do your best to make sure that you're only watering the soil that needs it and not everything else, for two reasons. You're going to reduce the number of weeds that you have to deal with, and two, water is a precious resource here, so we try to use it only where we need to. And the more water-wise you are, the happier you and the creatures in your little environment are going to be. And if you're not sure if it's time to water, there's a really quick and easy rule of thumb for your garden bed. And that is basically if the top 2 inches of your soil are dry, or basically they don't remind you of what it's like to touch a wrung out sponge, it's kind of soft and you feel that moisture on your fingers when you pull your fingers away, that's time to water. If that top 2 inches are dry, water. I also want to make a point for those of you who are not from this region. Maybe you come from a place where the soil's richer and you're used to more rain. Root rot is really not a thing. So overwatering is really hard for most garden plants. So if you're growing a vegetable garden, unless you're watering like twice a day for 20 minutes or 30 minutes, you're probably not going to overwater, and your roots are probably going to be just fine. Your plants will tell you if it's too much water. For those of you growing in containers, your watering habits are even more critical. There's 2 things that happen to pots outside. The first is that roots get hotter in pots than they do in the ground. Plants don't like hot feet. Second, they dry out a lot more quickly. Basically, hot, dry weather means that your soil dries out faster. So they need watering way more often than an in-ground garden does. During this time of year, I water my potted plants daily. Sometimes actually in July and August, I water them twice a day because it gets that hot. But I only water twice a day if they're showing water stress, or if that top 2 inches is actually showing that it's dry. Super important tip number 2, do not let your plants get repeatedly water stressed. Once in a blue moon, they'll be fine. It's basically like you being thirsty after a hot day. But if you do it over and over again, it doesn't matter if you soak them with water to try to get them to come back every other day. They're actually going to lose strength. They need moisture to do that thing at night that I was telling you about, where they store up all of their energy so that they're stronger. If they don't have the water, they don't have the resources that they're going to need to be able to weather the problems that you can run into out in the wild here. Basically, your plant will grow weak and it'll die even though you're trying to save it. Let's take one look real quick about watering your potted plants. This applies to your garden potted plants. Maybe you have a container garden on your patio or your apartment balcony. There's a lot of different reasons why people are growing in pots. Also, maybe you have pots in your house plants that you want to water. Maybe they're not doing great. Let's look at the right and wrong way to water a potted plant. This is not watering a plant. This, till it drains, that is watering a potted plant. Make sure it goes all the way through. You need all of this soil here to get wet. If you're just watering the top surface of it, all of this soil is going to dry out and become hydrophobic. I'll cover that in a different episode. And basically it won't absorb water, and you'll have to do some, extra work to make it work again. This particular plant is a cherry moya. It's a fruit tree. I've never eaten the fruit. I'm really excited. I hope it works. For small plants in pots like the one that I was holding, it's really easy to tell if they need water or not just by the weight. So you can actually pick up the plant. If it feels lighter than it normally does, it's pretty much time to water. You can kind of learn where that sweet spot is by testing the top 2 layers, lifting it, figuring out what that weight feels like. And you get good enough, you can just pick it up, know if it needs water, and water it. And that's it. Those are the basics to the art of watering, because it is an art, it's not a science. It's a thing that you dial in on and you figure out as you go. There is no one right way. I'm sorry to tell you that. There's not one equation. It's just what you can make happen in the best possible way for your environment. So let's go over those points again. Water long, water slow, water regularly on a regular schedule, do not water during the hottest part of the day, and conserve water by making sure you're only watering the sections of soil that you need to. Let me know if you've had to change any of your watering practices in the comments below, and any neat tricks that maybe you've come across that you could share with the rest of us. And how about a show of hands for how many of you know what an olla is, and whether you'd like to see an episode about how to make a cost-efficient olla, maybe from different materials. don't forget your sun protection and to like and subscribe and hit that bell so that you know when I post my next video about pollinators, why honeybees aren't our only heroes, and how you can attract more to your garden. See you next time.